You don't belong here, everyone can see it. My sister-in-law said it quietly, right into my ear, her champagne breath warm against my cheek. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She was smiling at someone across the room, waving her fingers in a little greeting, perfectly composed, like she'd just commented on the weather. I was standing at the entrance of the Aldridge, one of the most expensive private dining rooms in the city, holding a gift bag. I'd wrapped myself because I didn't have time to go to a boutique. My brother's promotion dinner. Black tie, 60 guests, an open bar that probably cost more than my first car. I looked down at my dress. I'd bought it 3 years ago for a friend's wedding. Navy blue, simple, not flashy. It fit fine. I'd steamed it that morning. My shoes were from a consignment shop, but they were good leather, barely worn. I thought I'd done okay. My sister-in-law Tara had just walked in wearing something that probably cost $4,000. I know because she'd mentioned the number twice on the group chat. She was stunning, and she knew it, and she used it like a weapon. She moved away from me before I could respond, gliding toward my brother with both arms open, and I stood there alone at the entrance of a room full of people I half knew, and a dress I suddenly hated. I almost turned around. I want to be honest about that. There was a real moment where I thought about walking back to the valet, getting my car, going home, and texting my brother a congratulations. I'd done it before. I was good at disappearing quietly so no one had to feel uncomfortable about me. But I didn't leave. I found my seat. I ordered sparkling water because the wine list had no prices and I wasn't about to guess wrong in front of people who'd judge me for it. I smiled at the strangers beside me. I ate the bread, and I let the night happen. Here's what nobody at that table knew about me. I'll get to it, but first you need to understand what kind of family I come from, because none of what happened that night makes sense without it. My brother's name is Owen. He's 4 years older than me. When we were growing up, Owen was the one who got new cleats for soccer season. I wore the same sneakers to school for 2 years until the soles started separating and I used a hot glue gun to fix it myself. Owen had a tutor for the SATs. I studied from a library book I renewed 6 times. Owen's college application was edited by a professional consultant my parents paid $800 for. Mine, I wrote at the kitchen table at midnight after a closing shift at the diner where I worked weekends. None of that is a complaint. My parents didn't have endless money. They made choices, and Owen was the choice they made. He was the son. He was the one who was going to carry the name and buy them a house someday and make it all mean something. I understood the logic even as a kid. I just also understood that I was on my own. I got a partial scholarship to a state school. I took out loans for the rest. I worked through every semester. Front desk at a hotel, then banquets, then events coordinating when I figured out I was good at the operational side of hospitality. After graduation, I took a job at a mid-tier hotel group doing venue management. I was underpaid and overworked, and I learned everything. I saved aggressively. Not because I had a grand plan, because scarcity had been my language since childhood, and I didn't know how to spend freely even when I had a little more room. When I was 26, a commercial property broker I'd worked with on a conference event told me about a restaurant group in serious financial trouble. 3 locations, all in good neighborhoods, all hemorrhaging cash because the ownership was chaotic and the management was worse. The bank was tired of them. The assets were going to auction. I made an offer on one location, a small Italian place in the Riverton neighborhood, the kind of spot that should have been printing money but wasn't, because the previous owner had staffed it with his friends and let the kitchen run wild. My offer was low enough that it hurt to say out loud. They took it. I spent 8 months barely sleeping. I hired a proper chef. I rebuilt the front of house. I got a liquor license for the patio. I renamed it and redesigned the logo and reached out to every food blogger and local press contact I had for my events days. 14 months after I signed the papers, it was booked out 3 weeks in advance on weekends. I used that equity to buy the second location when the original group fully collapsed. Then a third. By the time my brother got the senior VP promotion that warranted this dinner, I owned 4 restaurants and was under contract on a 5th. Owen didn't know. My parents didn't know the full picture. They knew I had a restaurant the way you'd say someone has a small garden plot. They had no idea it was a portfolio. I kept it quiet deliberately. I'd watched what happened to other people when family found out about money. The requests. The loans that were never loans. The sudden closeness that tasted like something else. I had kept my mouth shut and my books locked in my life my own. So, back to the dinner. By the time the second course came out, I had cataloged the social architecture of the room, Owen's boss and his wife at the head table, a man named Mr. Hartwell who my brother clearly needed to impress, Tara's parents, the Colemans, seated strategically close to Mr. Hartwell, doing that suburban country club networking thing where every sentence is really a credential. A handful of Owen's colleagues, in that particular mode of friendly competitive that people in finance do. And then a scatter of family and friends, some of whom I recognized and some I didn't. I was seated between one of Owen's college friends and Tara's younger sister, a 22-year-old who spent most of the meal with her phone under the table. Fine, I wasn't there for sparkling conversation. I was there because he was my brother and it was his night, and despite everything I still loved him in that complicated, worn-down way you love someone who has never quite seen you clearly. Then Tara's mother, Sandra Coleman, leaned across the table. She had that particular kind of energy where everything she says sounds like an observation but functions like a verdict. She looked at me the way certain women look at other women. A fast scan, head to feet, cataloging. Owen tells us you work in restaurants, she said. Not unkindly. The not unkindly is what made it brutal. Yes, I said. How fun. She smiled. My niece waitress all through college. Such a great way to save up. Her husband laughed a little. Owen's colleague across the table looked at his bread plate. Tara, 2 seats down, said nothing. She lifted her wine glass. Actually, I own them, I said. Sandra blinked. Sorry, the restaurants. I own them. She did that thing where you smile while recalibrating. Oh, how lovely! Like a little cafe. I almost let it go. I have a long, documented history of letting things go in rooms like that one. I smiled back at her and turned to my water glass and thought, just eat the food and go home. But then Owen laughed. He laughed from down the table, not looking at me, saying something quietly to Tara that I couldn't hear, and she laughed too. And then they both glanced over at me with that specific look, the one I'd been getting my whole life. That said, she's still doing that thing where she overstates. I felt something settle in me. Not anger. Anger is hot. This was cold. This was the specific cold clarity of a person who has been underestimated once too often by people who should know better. I excused myself to use the restroom. I stood at the sink and I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. Navy dress, consignment shoes, hair. I'd done myself. I looked fine. I looked like me. I texted my CFO, can you pull the Q3 consolidated report and send it to my personal email? Tonight, if possible. He sent it in 11 minutes. He's efficient like that. I went back to the table. I finished my dinner. I listened to Mr. Hartwell give a toast about Owen's leadership and vision, and I watched my brother glow under it, and I felt the complicated love again. This frustrating, persistent thing that wouldn't go away no matter how many times it got stepped on. Then dessert came, and Sandra started up again. She was talking about the Hamptons house they were looking at, and how the market had been brutal, and she turned to me with that performative sympathy face and said, "It must be so hard in the service industry right now, with inflation and staffing. I imagine it's hard to keep even the smallest operations afloat." Tara added, without looking up from her creme brulee. Owen mentioned you've been having some struggles. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. A lot of small businesses fail in the first few years. I heard Owen make a small sound. I looked at him. He was staring at his dessert. He had told her something? I didn't know what, but he had given her something to use, and she had used it and he was letting it happen. That was the moment, not Sandra's comment. Owen's silence. My brother watched his wife use a half-truth as a weapon against me, and he sat there with a silver spoon and said nothing. I had paid for his first suit out of my own account when he got the interview that started this whole career. He didn't know that. Our mother had borrowed the money from me and told him it was from her savings. I had signed a personal guarantee on a lease to help my parents not lose their apartment the year his startup had a bad quarter, and he couldn't contribute to the family expenses. He didn't know that either. I had paid for things quietly for years in the way that quiet daughters do, accepting the invisibility as the price of keeping the peace. But the peace wasn't something I'd actually had. I'd just been funding someone else's comfort. I set down my spoon. I opened my phone. I pulled up the email from my CFO. Can I share something? I said. My voice came out calm. It surprised even me. Sandra was still talking. She paused, looked at me with light condescension, gestured vaguely as if to say, "Go ahead if you must." I turned my phone screen toward the center of the table. The consolidated revenue report for Hearthstone Hospitality Group, my LLC, Q3, 4 restaurant locations, YTD figures across the top. "These are my restaurants," I said. "This is the revenue." The table went quiet. Not the polite quiet of a conversation pause. The dense, pressurized quiet of a room recalibrating. Sandra leaned forward. Her husband's eyebrows went up. Tara's creme brulee spoon stopped midair. Owen looked up from his plate, and for the first time all night, he really looked at me. "That's not," he started. "It's real," I said. "You can Google Hearthstone Hospitality. The Aldridge downtown is one of mine, actually." I let that land for a second. We're sitting in it right now. Another silence, different texture, denser. "Mr. Hartwell," Owen's boss, the man my brother had spent 6 weeks preparing to impress, turned in his chair and looked at me with the particular alertness of someone who has just identified a person of consequence in the room. "You own the Aldridge?" "I do. And the Hearthstone on Clement, the new Provisions location in Marin, and I'm closing on a 5th property in December," Mr. Hartwell said with genuine warmth. "I had dinner here for my anniversary last month. This place is exceptional." "Thank you. We have a great team." Sandra had gone very still. Her husband was smiling in that way where you can tell someone is frantically adjusting their behavior in real time. Tara had put her spoon down. Owen stared at me. His expression was complicated in a way I couldn't fully read. Some shame in it, some confusion, something else I didn't have a name for yet. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. I thought about that question for a second. It deserved a real answer, because every time I've had something, someone in this family has needed it, I said. And I wanted to keep this one thing mine until I was sure it was solid. The table was very quiet. Mr. Hartwell's wife touched her husband's arm and murmured something. A few of Owen's colleagues were carefully not looking at us. Tara spoke first. Her voice was different now. The social performance had dropped and something more honest and less flattering was underneath. "So all of this," she gestured at the room, "you arranged this venue?" "The event was booked through the restaurant's normal reservation system," I said. "Owen's assistant called last month. I recognized the name on the booking." "And you said nothing?" "I wanted to see the night." That probably sounds cruel. I thought about whether it was. I didn't set them up for humiliation. They did that themselves. I just didn't intervene. There's a difference, though. It's not always a comfortable one. Owen left the table for about 10 minutes. I don't know where he went. When he came back, he sat down quietly and didn't speak for a while. His boss was talking to me about the restaurant industry, and the conversation had moved into something genuine and interesting. I like talking about the business. I'm good at it. Later, when the dinner wound down and people were gathering their coats, Owen found me by the bar. Just the two of us for a moment. "I told her you'd been struggling," he said. I don't know what I thought. I thought that was the story. "I know," I said. "I should have said something when she was talking like that." "Yes," I said. "You should have said something when she was talking like that." "Yes," I said. "You should have." He looked at his shoes, then back at me, who paid for my suit, the interview suit, gray, years ago. "Mom said it was her." I didn't answer. "It was you," he said. Not a question. I still didn't answer. He looked like he was doing math. A long, slow addition of things he maybe should have wondered about before. I watched him do it and I felt the love again, that stubborn, battered thing, and I also felt very tired. "I'm not angry," I said, because I wasn't exactly. Anger had somewhere along the way become something else. Resolution. Forward motion. The clarity that comes when you stop waiting for someone to finally see you and start building things they'll eventually have to look at. "I don't know how to," he started. "You don't have to figure it out tonight," I said. "Tonight is your night." "Congratulations on the promotion." "I mean it." I hugged him. He held on a beat longer than usual. I got my coat from the host stand, my Scodes rack, my staff member who smiled at me and said, "Good night, Ms. Wren," and I walked out to my car. I sat in the parking garage for a few minutes before I drove home, not because I was upset. More like I needed a moment of stillness after the long tension of the evening. Here's what I've learned about family and money. The silence you keep to protect yourself gets read as shame. If you don't announce what you have, people assume you don't have much. And if you don't push back when they treat you accordingly, they assume they're right. I had been so focused on protecting my business from the gravitational pull of family need that I had let them build a story about me that wasn't true, and I'd been too tired, too private, too conditioned to smallness to correct it. I'm not saying the reveal was elegant. There is something uncomfortable about the fact that it took a balance sheet to change the way people at that table spoke to me. That part stings if I think about it too long. The respect I got in the last 30 minutes of that dinner should have been there all along. It shouldn't require proof. People shouldn't need the revenue report to treat you like you're worth something. But this is the world, and those are the rules. And I have made my peace with playing the game well rather than pretending the game doesn't exist. Sandra called my mother the next morning. I heard about it through the family text chain. A long message about how I was clearly very accomplished, and how she'd always believed in me. My mother texted me separately asking if we could have lunch. I said yes to the lunch. Some doors I'm willing to open, some I'm not. My brother and I talked on the phone 4 days later, a real conversation, the kind we hadn't had in probably 3 years. He asked questions. I answered them honestly. I told him about the suit, about the lease guarantee, about the winter I ate rice and beans for 6 weeks because I had wired money home and couldn't stretch my budget to groceries. He was quiet for a long time after that. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once and it sounded like he meant it more each time. I'm not ready to call us fixed. I don't know if a single honest conversation repairs years of unexamined imbalance. But it's something. It's a door cracked open where before there was just a wall. What I know is this: I built something real. I built it in the years when no one was watching and no one was asking about me and the family energy was all directed somewhere else. I built it with the money I didn't spend on things other people in my life took for granted. I built it in the hours after other people's closing shifts and in the margins of spreadsheets at 2 a.m. and in the specific discipline of a person who has known what it means to not have enough. And the building of it was never about them. That's the part I want to be clear about. I didn't grow a company so I could someday set it down on a table in front of people who'd underestimated me. That's a good scene in a movie. In real life, the work was just the work. It kept me grounded and focused and honest about what I was capable of. The table moment happened because the opportunity was there and the timing aligned, and I was, finally, past the point of shrinking to protect other people's egos. That's all it was. I drove home through the city that night, past the Hearthstone on Clement with its warm amber lights and the line of people waiting outside, and I felt something I don't have a perfect word for. Not pride exactly. Something quieter than that. The satisfaction of a person who asked nothing of anyone and built it anyway. I have a meeting on Monday with the contractor on the 5th location. It's a former supper club in the Marina District. Beautiful bones, completely neglected. The kind of place that should have been something great 20 years ago and never quite got there. I've been looking at it for 8 months. The numbers finally worked. I'm going to make it something worth waiting for. My family will probably hear about it when I open. Maybe before, if Owen pays attention. And that's fine. I'm not hiding anymore. I just always have been. And now I don't need to be. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be acknowledged by the room they grew up in. I spent mine building a room of my own. That's a better use of time, at least in my experience. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far this one travels. I've thought a lot about that dinner since it happened. Not the moment I turned my phone screen toward the table. Not Sandra's face when she recalibrated. Not even Owen's silence when his wife said what she said. What I keep coming back to is smaller than all of that. It's the moment I almost left. The moment I stood at the entrance of my own restaurant and a dress I'd steamed that morning and thought about going home. I almost let them keep the story they built about me. That's the part that stays with me. Here's what I've come to understand. Not as a lesson someone handed me, but as something I worked out slowly. Over years, the way you are treated by people is almost always a direct reflection of the information they have about you. Not who you are, the information. Sandra didn't treat me like I was worthless because I was worthless. She treated me that way because she had constructed a version of me out of half-truths and absence, and I had never corrected it. I had been so committed to protecting what I built that I had allowed a false version of myself to occupy every family table I sat at. That is a kind of ethical failure too, I think. Not as obvious as Tara's cruelty or Owen's silence, but real. When you shrink yourself to avoid conflict, when you stay quiet to keep the peace, you are not being humble. You are being dishonest. About who you are, about what you've done, about what you deserve. I told myself I was protecting the business. What I was also doing, if I'm honest, was protecting them from having to be wrong about me. I was making it easy for them to keep the comfortable story. That wasn't generous. That was avoidance wearing generosity's clothes. The intelligence piece is this. I had to be smart enough to build something real before I could speak from a position of truth rather than defensiveness. There's a difference between announcing what you have to earn respect and simply no longer concealing what you've built when concealing it serves no one. The first is performance. The second is just accuracy. I waited until the facts were undeniable. That part I'd do again, but the resilience, the getting through the years before that dinner, that was never dramatic. It wasn't a montage. It was just choosing over and over in quiet and in private to do the next right thing, pay the bill, take the meeting, sign the lease, eat the rice and beans and show up the next morning anyway. Resilience isn't a feeling, it's a practice. You do it when it doesn't feel heroic, which is most of the time, and the accumulation of that is the only thing that actually moves your life forward. Owen is trying. I believe that. Sandra sent a fruit basket to my office, which I thought was a very Sandra way of handling it. Tara has been quiet, which is honestly the best version of Tara I've encountered. And I have a contractor walk through on Monday for the 5th location. The bones are beautiful. The work will be hard. I'll show up anyway. That's the whole thing, really. You show up, you build, you stop making yourself small so other people don't have to stretch to see you. And eventually the room catches up.